Hello, my name's Alex. I'm 27, and I guess you could say I was looking for something quieter. After 6 years of living in the middle of a city that never shuts up, I wanted peace. Not the kind you find in a cabin in the woods or some retreat in the mountains. Just a neighborhood somewhere with lawns, mailboxes, and the occasional hello over the fence. That's how I ended up here in a modest two-story house at the end of a cul-de-sac just outside Portland. It's got creaky floors, a weird smell in the basement, and the kind of charm that takes time to notice. But it's mine. And for the first time in a long time, I wake up without the sound of sirens or angry neighbors slamming doors at 2 a.m. The first week was a blur of unpacking boxes, losing things I just unpacked, and eating frozen meals standing over the sink. I didn't know anyone here at first. That was the point. I thought solitude was what I needed to breathe again. But it turns out the silence starts talking to you if it hangs around too long. It was a sunny Wednesday afternoon when I first noticed her. She was out on the porch next door trimming the ends of a large lavender bush that lined her walkway. I couldn't tell you what caught my attention first. Maybe the way she moved calm and deliberate, or maybe the quiet strength in how she carried herself. Either way, I paused for a second too long. She looked up, caught my gaze, and smiled. Not the awkward kind of smile you give a stranger. This one was different, confident knowing. I gave a quick nod and looked away. I didn't want to come off weird, but something about that moment lingered. Over the next few days, I kept noticing her. Always outside in the mornings watering her plants, sometimes sitting on her porch with a glass of something coffee, wine, maybe tea. She was probably in her early 40s. Her dark hair had streaks of silver in it, tied loosely. Her face wasn't overly made up, and that made her even more striking. She had this natural look, graceful but not trying to be. She looked real. We didn't speak until the following Saturday. I had just finished dragging my trash bins to the curb when I turned and saw her again. She was wearing this loose white button-up and denim shorts. Sunlight fell across her face like in a movie. I stared too long. She didn't flinch. Instead, she tilted her head slightly, walked to the edge of her porch, and said, "Come in if you're brave enough." It knocked the breath out of me for a second. It wasn't flirtatious in the obvious sense. It felt like a challenge, a test. I froze. She watched me for a beat, then turned and went inside, leaving the door slightly open. I stood there like an idiot for maybe 10 seconds, and then I walked up her steps. The house smelled like cinnamon and wood polish, warm, but not cozy in a fake way. She led me into the living room without saying a word and motioned for me to sit. I did. She poured 2 glasses of red wine. "I'm Lauren," she said, handing me one. "Alex," I replied. We sipped in silence for a few minutes. She looked out the window, her face unreadable. "You live alone?" she asked. I nodded. "Just moved in. Needed a reset." She gave a small smile. Resets are harder than they sound. That was the first time I heard something heavy behind her voice, something tired. "I hope I wasn't rude earlier," I said. "I didn't mean to stare." She turned to me, then eyes calm and direct. "You were staring, but it's okay. It's been a while since anyone really looked at me." The words hit hard. Not dramatic, just honest. She leaned back and her fingers played with the stem of the glass. "My husband's away. He travels a lot. Even when he's home, he's not really here." She paused. "I don't usually talk to neighbors, but you look like someone who listens." I didn't know what to say to that, so I just nodded. We talked for almost an hour. Nothing too deep yet, but there was a rhythm to it, comfortable, not forced. Her voice softened over time like she was slowly letting go of something. When I finally stood to leave, she walked me to the door and smiled, not with her lips, but with her eyes. "I'll see you around," she said. "Yeah," I replied, "definitely." And just like that, I stepped into something I hadn't planned. Something I didn't understand yet, but I couldn't ignore. I hadn't planned on seeing her again that soon. But the next evening, I was on my porch pretending to read a book I'd already read twice when I heard her voice again. "Wine?" she asked from across the fence. She was leaning on the railing of her porch, glass in hand, dressed in a long gray sweater that slipped off one shoulder. The sun was just beginning to dip, and the light hit her face like something out of a painting. I stood. By the time I walked over, she already had a second glass poured. Inside, the living room felt warmer than I remembered. Or maybe I was just more nervous this time. It was quiet except for the faint hum of a jazz record playing somewhere in the background. Lauren handed me the wine without a word and sat across from me. She didn't speak right away. She looked tired, not physically, but like someone who's been holding something inside for too long. Her eyes weren't avoiding mine, but they weren't searching either, just resting there. "I'm not really good at small talk," she said finally. "Same," I replied. She smirked, but it faded quickly. Then she took a breath, as if she was choosing whether to speak or stay silent. "I used to be someone else," she said, "before this house, before the porch, before the plans." I didn't say anything. I just listened like she said she thought I would. "I married Tom when I was 28. We were in love, or at least I thought we were." She paused, swirling the wine slowly in her glass. "We tried to have kids for years, doctors, treatments, schedules, everything. It became our full-time job. And when it didn't work, we stopped trying. But we also stopped touching, stopped talking." The house stayed quiet. She looked up, like checking to see if I was still with her. "He threw himself into work, travel meetings, clients. I stayed here. Became someone who tends to lavender and rearranges furniture she doesn't even like. I don't think he cheated right away, but eventually he did. You can feel it when someone disappears while still being in the same room." Her voice didn't tremble. She told this story to herself too many times for that. I didn't leave. I don't know why. Maybe because the idea of starting over sounded more terrifying than staying stuck. Or maybe because I got used to the silence. The room felt heavy. I didn't know if I was supposed to say anything, so I didn't. Just nodded slowly. She smiled barely. "Sorry, that's a lot for a second glass of wine." "No," I said. "Thank you for trusting me with it." There was a long pause. "I don't know what I'm doing," she said finally. "Inviting you in, talking to you. It's not like me, but something about you, it's just easy." I looked at her, and for a second, I thought I should say something clever, something reassuring. But instead I just said the truth. "I don't mind being here. You're not the only one who needed to breathe." Her eyes softened. She looked down at her glass and stood up. "Come with me," she said. She led me to the back of the house through a hallway lined with framed photos, most of them of places not people, and out onto a small patio. There was a swing, two chairs, and string lights overhead that she turned on with a soft click. The backyard was quiet, surrounded by trees private. We sat on the swing. The wood creaked under our weight. "When I bought this house, I thought it would be filled with life," she said, children, family laughter. "Instead, it became a storage unit for things that never happened." She looked at me again. There was no sadness in her expression anymore, just honesty, that calm kind of honesty that hits harder than tears. Sometimes, she continued, I imagine what it would have been like to meet someone who actually wanted to understand me, not just solve me, not just fix me, but really see me. She didn't say it like a hint or a move. It wasn't flirtation. It was a confession, and I felt it. I didn't touch her. I didn't say something bold or stupid. We just sat there for a while on that creaking swing, sipping wine under the dim light, surrounded by the echo of things unsaid. Eventually, I stood to leave. "I'll walk you out," she said. At the door, she didn't hug me or touch me, just opened it slowly and stood beside it. "Thanks for coming by," she said. "You listen like someone who's been hurt too." I didn't answer. I didn't have to. I walked back to my house a few feet away, but it felt like miles. That night, I couldn't sleep. Not because I was overwhelmed or confused, but because for the first time in a long time, I felt like I had stepped into something real. The next few days passed quietly. I didn't see Lauren out front, and I didn't want to come off as overeager by knocking on her door. So I waited, watered my plants, cleaned the garage even though it wasn't dirty, read the same paragraph in a book 3 times without understanding it. She stayed in my head like a song I couldn't shake. On Thursday evening, just as the sun was setting, I was on my porch with a beer pretending to check emails. That's when I heard the screen door across the way creak open. I looked up. She didn't say anything, just gave me a look, a small tilt of the head, and a half smile. Then she turned and walked inside, leaving the door open again. It was enough. I left the beer on the step and walked across the street like I was following gravity instead of my own legs. Inside, the lights were dim. A candle flickered in the corner of the room, and there was something on the stove soup, maybe. She didn't seem surprised to see me. No small talk, No questions, just, you hungry I was. But more than that, I was starving for whatever this was between us. We ate in the kitchen, chicken noodles simple and warm. She had her hair tied up, no makeup, and a worn hoodie that probably belonged to her husband, though I didn't ask. Dinner was quiet, comfortable. We talked about nothing, favorite movies, terrible coffee, the worst neighbors we'd ever had. She laughed once, really laughed, and the sound caught me off guard. It was the first time I'd heard it. After dinner, we moved to the living room. She poured wine again. This time we sat on the couch, not opposite ends. I was close enough to notice a small scar on her wrist. She caught me looking. Fell off a bike when I was 12, she said. Still have a bike. It's rusting in the garage like everything else I don't know what to do with. I smiled. You seem to have a hard time letting go of things. She looked at me, then long and slow. I do. It got quiet again, but this time it wasn't uncomfortable. It was thick with something we both felt but weren't naming yet. I thought about you, she said suddenly, after you left. I didn't respond right away, just watched her eyes, which weren't hiding anything anymore. I wasn't sure if I'd see you again, she added. Most men your age would have run a second. I opened up about the ugly parts. I shifted slightly toward her. Maybe I like real more than easy. That made her smile. It wasn't a big smile. It was one of those half-curved ones where the lips move just slightly, but everything is in the eyes. And then she reached out, just her fingers brushing against mine light, like she was testing if I'd pull away. I didn't. Her hand stayed on mine. I can't promise you anything, she said softly. I'm still in the middle of something. I don't even know what this is. I'm not asking for anything, I said. I'm just here. She nodded. That's more than I've had in a long time. We sat like that for a while. The wine went untouched. The candle burned low. And then I said, barely above a whisper, you want to go outside? She nodded and we stepped out onto the patio again. The sky was clear this time, stars visible between the trees. We sat on the same swing, only this time our shoulders touched. She sighed. You make it easier to breathe. I turned to look at her. She was already looking at me. And then she leaned in slowly, like she was giving me time to change my mind. I didn't. Her lips touched mine, soft, hesitant, but sure. It wasn't desperate or rushed. It was quiet and full of every unspoken thought between us. When she pulled back, she didn't speak. Neither did I, because the silence finally made sense. We stayed outside until it got cold. Then I walked home across the street that felt different now, like some invisible thread connected her house to mine. I didn't sleep much that night, not out of restlessness, but because something inside me had shifted. I didn't know what this would become. I didn't know if it would fall apart or turn into something more, but I knew it was real. And for the first time in a long time, I wasn't afraid of where it might lead. The next few days, I kept waiting for the moment when it would all feel like a mistake. When I'd regret crossing the street, regret staying too long, regret leaning in. But that moment never came. Instead, everything just felt clearer. I didn't see Lauren right away. She didn't call. I didn't text. And still, there wasn't anxiety, just something quiet between us now, like a room with a light still on even when no one's there. On Sunday morning, I stepped outside with a cup of coffee, mostly out of habit. The air was crisp, sky still heavy with early fall gray. And there she was, standing by her car, wearing jeans and a light jacket, hair loose around her shoulders. She looked up, saw me, and smiled, not shy, not nervous, just normal. I raised my mug. Morning? You busy today? She asked. Nope. Want to help me at the hardware store? I need someone who can carry heavy things and doesn't roll their eyes at paint samples. I laughed. I think I can manage that. We drove with the windows down. She let her hand ride the breeze outside the passenger side window. Music played low, some folk song I didn't know, and she hummed along. At one point, she reached across and rested her hand on my leg, casual, like it had always belonged there. That tiny gesture, I don't know, it anchored me. We spent the afternoon picking out new cabinet handles, sandpaper, and a ridiculous amount of sample paint jars. I watched her argue with herself over shades of white that all looked the same to me, but I didn't mind. I liked seeing her focused on something that wasn't pain or memory, something simple. Back at her house, we carried the bags in and set them down in the kitchen. She stood in front of the open cabinets and said, I think I hate everything in here. You could change it all I offered. Start from scratch. She looked at me over her shoulder. Yeah, maybe I could. We didn't kiss that day. We didn't even talk about the one from before. But when I left that evening, she hugged me tight, slow with both arms and no words. The next time I saw her, it was raining. I showed up with no warning, soaked, no umbrella, holding a pizza box because it felt like the right kind of excuse. She opened the door and didn't say anything for a second. Then she smiled and then stepped aside. Come in if you're what enough, she said, smirking. I kicked off my shoes and walked in. She handed me a towel and we sat in the living room with the pizza between us, listening to the rain hit the windows. At one point I asked, does he know? She looked up. Tom, I nodded. No, he wouldn't notice, even if he did. She paused. He hasn't called in 4 days. Sometimes I wonder if he even remembers I'm here. There was no bitterness in her voice, just a kind of exhausted resignation. I hesitated, then asked, why are you still with him? She didn't answer right away. Then finally, habit, fear, shame? I don't know, maybe all of it. She stood, walked toward the kitchen, poured herself some wine, then leaned against the counter. I used to believe in marriage. I really did, she said. But then it starts to feel like you're playing a part in a play that no one's watching. I got up, crossed the room, and stood near her, but not too close. You don't have to keep acting, I said softly. Her eyes searched mine for a second, and then for the second time she kissed me. But this one wasn't soft. It wasn't hesitant. It was real. Her hands in my hair, my arms around her waist. It felt like years of silence collapsing into one long, heavy exhale, like two people trying to remember what it felt like to be wanted and finally getting their answer. We broke apart breathless. She rested her forehead against mine. I'm scared, she whispered. I know, I said. Me too, she looked up. This can't be just an escape. It's not. Then don't disappear on me. I won't. That night, I didn't go home. We didn't sleep together. We just lay on our couch under a blanket, tangled together in that quiet, vulnerable space where the world stops trying to be loud. At one point, around 2:00 a.m., she said, I think I've already made my decision. I didn't push her to explain. I just held her closer because I had already made mine too. The morning after we fell asleep on our couch, I woke up to the sound of soft clinking in the kitchen. Lauren was already dressed jeans, sweater, barefoot, pouring coffee into 2 mugs. Her hair was tied up messily like she hadn't looked in a mirror yet. She looked over her shoulder at me and smiled like I'd always been there. Morning, she said. Morning, I replied, voice rough from sleep. I sat up, folded the blanket, and walked over. She handed me a mug without a word, and we stood there for a moment, quiet, calm, real. The sun broke through the window above her sink, and for the first time, her house didn't feel cold. It didn't feel like a museum of a life she never got to live. It felt like home. I need to tell you something, she said. I tensed a little. I guess I was bracing for the other shoe that this was a mistake line. Instead, she exhaled. I filed the divorce papers yesterday. I blinked. She sipped her coffee. Did it online. Took me 15 minutes. He'll be served when he lands in LA next week. I didn't say anything right away, not because I didn't know how I felt, but because I did, and I wanted to be sure before I spoke. You sure? I asked softly. She nodded, more than I've ever been. I watched her for a moment. There was no trace of hesitation on her face, no weight of second thoughts. She looked lighter, as if something invisible had finally been lifted off her chest. I stayed in that marriage because I didn't want to admit that it had ended a long time ago, she continued. It wasn't the affair or the silence. It was me holding on to something that didn't exist anymore. I needed to let go, and I did. I put my mug down and reached for her hand. She let me take it. And what about us? I asked. Her eyes met mine. That's not a question for me to answer alone. So I gave her mine. I want to be with you. Not because I feel sorry for you. Not because you need saving, but because every time I see you, I feel more like myself. You make me want to stay. She stepped closer. Her forehead touched mine. Then stay, she whispered. We stood there in the kitchen, holding each other, letting the words settle. It wasn't some passionate movie scene. There were no sweeping gestures, no dramatic music, just two people choosing each other quietly and fully. Weeks passed. Lauren changed the locks, moved his boxes into the garage. When he finally showed up, it was quick. He didn't yell, didn't beg. He just looked around like the place didn't feel like his anymore, which was true. He took what he needed and left. No goodbye, no closure, but that was its own kind of ending. We didn't go public right away. A few neighbors probably suspected. There were glances, hushed, side comments, but no one said anything. And honestly, we didn't care. I started spending more nights at her place than whole days. I helped her repaint the kitchen even though I still couldn't tell the difference between eggshell white and winter mist. We planted a garden. She laughed when the tomatoes died, and I blamed the squirrels. Some nights we'd sit on the swing outside not saying much. She'd rest her head on my shoulder and we'd just listen to the wind move through the trees. She once said, "You know, this isn't the life I thought I'd have." I said, "Me neither." And then she smiled, leaned in and said, "But maybe it's the life I was supposed to." A few months later, I officially moved in. We didn't make some grand announcement. No ring, no wedding, not yet. We were just together, the kind of together that felt earned, built quiet and strong. I'd wake up and hear her humming while making breakfast. She'd read while I worked in the garage. Sometimes we'd argue about dumb things, how many throw pillows were too many, or who left the porch light on. But we never argued about us because we knew what we'd come from, and we knew what we had now. She wasn't just my neighbor anymore. She was my partner. She was my beginning. I was hers. A year can go by without you even realizing it until you look back and see how far you've come. It's been 12 months since that morning in her kitchen when Lauren told me she filed the divorce papers. Since we stood there in the soft morning light, holding hands, trying not to shake from the weight of what we were stepping into. Now we live somewhere new, a smaller town quieter than the last. We wanted to leave the street where we met, not because we hated it, but because it was full of shadows. Her old life was too loud there. The mailbox still had his name on it. The walls still remembered their fights. And the porch, the one where she first told me, "Come in if you're brave enough," was too full of ghosts. So we packed up, rented a little two-bedroom house near the coast where the air always smells like salt and the windows rattle when it rains. It's not perfect. The bathroom door sticks, the roof leaks when it storms, and the heater makes a sound like it's chewing on gravel, but we love it because it's ours. I work at a local hardware store now. It's not glamorous, but I like it. I fix things, talk to people, carry lumber. There's a rhythm to it, something honest about showing up every day and knowing you help someone with something real. Lauren started working part-time at a used bookstore down the street. It's small, barely stays open, but she likes the smell of old pages and the silence between customers. She says it feels like therapy, but without the couch. Some mornings we walk to the bakery together, hold hands, and laugh about things that don't matter. On weekends, we drive no destination, just a tank of gas and time to kill. We've seen mountains, lakes, tiny diners, and forgotten towns. We sleep in the back of the car, sometimes curled up under blankets, whispering about dreams like teenagers. One night, while parked under the stars somewhere in Oregon, she turned to me and said, "You know, I don't think I'm meant to be a mother." There was no sadness in her voice, just peace, like someone who had finally made peace with the truth she used to fight. I looked at her and said, "You don't have to be. You're already everything to me." She smiled, touched my face gently, and kissed me. That was the end of the conversation and the beginning of something deeper. We don't talk about timelines or expectations. We don't make 5-year plans. We just live day to day, moment to moment, and we're happy. Not the kind of happy you post about, the quiet kind, the kind where she makes pancakes even though she hates cooking just because she knows I love them, the kind where I leave notes in her books for her to find days later. She keeps them, everyone. Sometimes late at night when the world is dark and still, she'll roll over and whisper, "Do you ever wonder what would have happened if I hadn't said it, what I'll ask pretending not to know?" She smiles that same sideways smile from the porch a year ago. "Come in if you're brave enough." And I'll answer the same every time. I still would have come in one way or another because I know I would have. She saved me in ways neither of us fully understands. And maybe I saved her a little too, not by fixing anything, but just by showing up, staying, choosing her every single day. And that's what we keep doing, choosing each other every morning, every night, every quiet, beautiful, ordinary moment. Here's a question for you. If you were Alex, Would you have accepted Lauren's bold invitation to come in if you're brave enough? Or would you have hesitated, unsure of crossing into such uncharted emotional territory?